Welcome to another episode of the Cool Tools Show and Tell. Our special guest this week is Rich Edwards. Hey, Rich, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure thing, Kevin. Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Rich Edwards. I'm the CEO of a company called Mindspan Systems. We help community banks and credit unions use their data to serve their customers better.
Well, thank you for volunteering for this episode. I know you have some cool tools for us to share. So, Rich, what's one of your favorite tools that you like to share with us?
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of mechanical pencils. Something about it, right? And particularly like Japanese ones. I remember there was a store in Manhattan. I'm sure it's long gone now, called Lee Studio on 57th Street, that would always have like the oddball, like weird mechanical pencils. I remember I bought this one is a Koh-i-Noor. I bought this in the 80s sometimes. It's all faded and everything, but it's one of those, like it has this knurled edge on it and this like very weird barrel. And it's like all these like very particular weird aspects to it. The one I'm using now is a Uni, and it's the Core edition of it. And the cool thing here is as you push down on the pencil, as you like push pressure and release, it actually rotates the lead inside. And there's a little window that you can kind of see that in there. And so it keeps it sharp, right? Because normally you're writing, you do like a page of work and it kind of gets this slanted edge on it. It spins it around. So you always have this very, very sharp point, even with something like this, that's a 5 millimeter lead. Being able to write very, very fine and precise lines, like there's someone else who has this same sickness of detail that I do in Japan designing pencils. So very, very pleased with it.
So a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One is, what are you using that fine pencil for? What do you do where that kind of precision and, minuteness is necessary?
Yeah. Mainly taking notes.
Okay.
Like many people, I spend a lot of time in meetings throughout the day.
Right.
And so I'll take notes and there'll be a little bit of doodles in there and everything. But I also tend to write very small.
Okay.
Even as I get older and I have to occasionally wear reading glasses, I still write small because I'm comfortable with it. So by training, I'm an engineer, and going through school in the late 80s, early 90s, it was mechanical drafting was a big part of it. So my handwriting kind of mimics that a little bit.
Okay. And why pencil and not ink?
I think the precision of it. I've tried writing with very fine, like 3 and 5 millimeter ink. Stadler makes some very, very nice. I think they're for drafting, but they call them like marking pens, but they're very, very fine. It's not the same thing. There's something about the feel, and I don't know if it's the lead or the graphite coming off on the page, but there's something tactile about it that's different than an ink pen or a rollerball or something. I'll use a pen I use normally is like the Fisher Space Pen, and that's okay, but that's only if it's got to be permanent or I'm signing something or something like that. If I'm just taking notes, like if I go to, it's always 5 millimeter pencil.
Because, the Japanese obviously make some very, very fine pointed pens.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And the people that I know whose handwriting is very minuscule were using pens. And so is smudging the pencil not an issue for you?
I really haven't had that big of an issue. Even for a while there, I'm a big Evernote user. Like you want to talk about like weird old stuff, right? Like I will take all my notes by hand and then scan them. Like, so I know there's some brokenness about that, or I'm holding on to something.
You're scanning and then OCRing or just scanning?
Yeah, it does it. Like, I think the way I have it set up is it'll OCR, but that's good for search every once in a while. I don't rely on it. I think it's only for reference. Like for me, it's very much the act of writing down the words is the act of memory, and everything else is kind of like backup and for reference.
Okay. And then the cost of the pen. What does the I mean, excuse me, the pencil.
Yeah, I think
This
it's like 17.
okay.
Let me see if I have the
Yeah, I
link right
think
here.
I
We can
can
kind of look at it. Yeah. It's not crazy expensive. Sorry, $9.
okay.
Normally 15. Right now it's on sale for 9.39.
Wow.
So
This is called the Uni Core
right.
Sharp Mechanical Pencil. Um, $9. So it rotates even though it's only how many millimeters? Is it a five?
This is 5, yeah.
Even if it's a 5 millimeter, it's still rotating it. Wow.
It's still rotating. Yeah,
Wow.
every time you push it down. If you look at there's a picture there in the
Mhm.
link, and you see this little orange window on the bottom.
Mhm.
That has it's either index mark or characters that as it's rotating, you can see it spin around, like it indicates what it's actually doing inside. So
And you say when you press down, I mean like when you're writing with it, or do you have to
yeah,
press down
like
in a different
you pick it up between letters
yeah.
and it will clock it. I want to say it's like maybe 10 or 12
Uh-huh.
around. So it's doing what, like maybe 5 to 10 degrees
Yeah.
every time you pick it up. So it's not big movements, but it's yeah.
Wow.
I mean, for $9, it's like how do they do that?
Yeah.
Like it's
Right.
amazing. It's almost a miracle, right?
Right.
That they can pull that off.
Yeah. Um, I know that I use mechanical pencils in my workshop, um, but I've used the disposable kind because
Right. Yeah.
um, I'm losing track of them. I have a lot of them everywhere, just so I always have one. Um, and they're little mechanical marvels too.
And what are you marking with?
Oh, like woodworking and stuff.
Woodworking. Okay. So
Just
probably not 5 mil, something a little
yeah, yeah,
thicker.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
just yeah, it's just sort of marking wood, measuring
Mhm.
stuff, all that kind of stuff. Um, well, Rich, that was great. So what's a second tool that you want to introduce us to?
Yeah, there's a cool thing from Scotch tape that's called the tape runner, and it's like this. It's a regular dispenser. I think the pattern on there is like little
But
dots.
you're holding up
Um,
something that's I don't know, but the size of an avocado, and but
Less than that, yeah.
like
I mean, it fits in your
in
palm.
your palm is sort of
So it's smaller than a regular like Scotch tape dispenser,
much smaller.
um, but it has a wheel on it, and as you run that across like a piece of paper or an index card, it leaves essentially a thin layer of what would almost be double-sided tape, but it's not quite that substantive. It's almost like a very thin film, and there's dots of adhesive to it. And so for this one, the blue one, this is repositionable, and essentially you're making post-it notes. It's like that level of adhesive, and so you can kind of put it up and reposition it. And like this was, I think I found this when I had a job where we went all in on design thinking. And so you do a lot of like the workshops and everything, and it's post-it notes all over the wall and little cartoons and everything. And we started to get fancier with it. And somebody had one of these. I said, that's really neat.
Right. So it's a way
Um,
to very neatly apply adhesive in a very controlled way on some paper, like
right,
either a permanent adhesive or repositional one,
right.
like the post-it. And instead of
And
having
then I also have the green, which is heavy duty, and
right,
this is permanent. Like that's not going
right.
anywhere.
So instead of having a can of sprayed adhesive or some kind of
Mhm.
sticky bottle of it, you have this very, very tidy tape.
Or double-sided tape.
Yeah.
That's probably the closest thing,
Right.
but it's nice in that it's this roller that's positionable. So like you don't have to have a straight edge.
Right.
You can do like a curved edge around the
Right.
outside. It's very precise. Yeah, and it works fantastic. It's just this again, another magical tool,
Right.
like how they come up with this.
Right.
And get it like exactly right where it needs to be
Right.
from a stickiness standpoint.
There's another version there's another kind of tape that's in the same kind of dispenser that's a whiteout tape
Mhm.
that you apply over um, something and like white paper and it makes it white again. And it's like in very, very dense, opaque, very thin white film that covers it. And it used to be for like when you were typewriting.
Yeah.
But we when we're doing illustrations, like ink illustrations, is
Mhm.
fantastic for making corrections when you're doing something in ink that you can't erase. So you just put this little film over it very, very quickly, instantly, dry, nothing, and it's a way for correcting um, mistakes or changes in ink drawings.
And is that like you're going to do a reproduction
Yeah,
on that, and so that won't show up?
right. Won't show up.
Yeah.
And even for some artists, it's okay even for presentation. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
if you're the kind of artist that likes that the witness marks they call them in
Sure.
workshops
Yeah.
where you show the progress of the making of it, you know. Anyway, so but it is mostly for reproduction.
Hmm. I remember something similar. I had a back to drafting a draftsman job one summer, and we were mainly doing drawings on vellum, right? So like
Yeah.
that thick, very thick, like 3 or 4 mil thick film, and there was like a bunch of weird stuff, to solvent to take ink off, and able to patch things in, or put pieces in there, and you have to spray it with like cranoline spray, and very very mechanical and
Right,
hands-on,
right, right.
Yes.
All that has been replaced by the beauty of computers. People don't realize um, the extent to which the laborious process
Oh yeah.
of doing things by hand, drafting, laying out, cut and paste. We literally would cut and
Hmm.
paste it.
Yeah.
We were using beeswax usually because you could reposition it if you had to. Um, and but just we know even film, literally you would cut and paste film and tape. So yeah, it was amazing. I mean, like audio tape. Um,
Right. Yeah, yeah, for editing.
you're
Yeah.
editing. Yeah, you're editing film by cutting it and gluing splicing it, and the same thing with audio. Each time you're making a little cut, it's
And everybody's been very nostalgic about this
no.
with it was 40th anniversary of the Macintosh,
Yeah,
right?
right, right,
Like
right.
a couple of weeks ago. And it
Yeah,
was like, oh, look at, Quark Express, and how that completely changed,
true,
desktop publishing, and it was
true.
this disruptive factor. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, Quark. The alternative was just mind-boggling tedious. So anyway, we're
Or craftsmanship, I guess, depending
no,
on
no.
which side of
Well,
the line you want
yeah,
to be. Yeah.
there was a certain joy in having accomplished it, but my gosh,
Yeah.
nobody in their right mind would go back to that unless it's an art piece of some sort.
Mhm.
But anyway, so these little analog tools of the tape that you're suggesting, the double back tape, is fantastic for when you're doing things in the analog world.
Yeah, I typically, like, I have a board in my office that I will put quotes or pictures of things. I don't know if a vision board's the right word,
Yeah.
but things that I want to glance at and be reminded of, powerful things to kind of trigger my memory. And like, again, I will typically print it out or write it and then stick it to that board. And
With the
that
repositional or with the
yeah,
permanent?
I'll usually use the permanent
Yeah,
ones, because repositioning are good for, just now, or we want to
yeah,
move it
yeah,
around. If it's going to stay there a long time, I'll usually go with
yeah.
the I think it's heavy duty,
Okay.
extra strength.
Right.
Sorry, the extra strength.
And these are called runners, Scotch tape runners,
Yes.
tape runner. Um, so yeah, tape runners and double-sided as well as repositionable.
Yeah, and they even like, even for something like this, they sell a refill,
Uh,
which is surprising, because you'd think,
yeah.
what is there, about a nickel worth of plastic on the outside, and
Hmm.
they're like, no, we'll give you the guts of it, and be able to reuse that, keep going forward. So,
Hmm.
kudos to them.
Yeah. Um, 3M. Okay, so so Scott, what's another tool that you like to suggest to us?
Yeah, one thing I was going to point to is a video series, and I sent you the link to it. And it was a guy who owned early mid '90s Mitsubishi car. It's a 3000 GT, and one of the features the car had when it came out was a like built-in factory car phone. I believe it was Diamondtel was the phone, and this guy, being a software engineer, figured out how he could essentially make that work, via a Bluetooth interface with the modern cell infrastructure, and retain all the functionality of the phone, like how it worked with the factory radio, how it would do announcements, the hands-free functionality, all circa 1993 or wherever it was, which was very. I mean, you look at what he did, and he has a whole series went through there. He made a custom Bluetooth board to kind of pull it off of the integration, published all the code on GitHub. Very, very impressive project, but it was, obstinately, keeping this technology going and making it relevant. And it's another one of those kind of like nostalgia projects, but very impressive and very well executed.
And was there a tool involved that you were suggesting?
I think it's more the spirit of what he did and how he was able to like basically manufacture the piece that went in there. He does talk about how he had the custom board built for it.
Okay.
It's about the third the way in on the whole piece, but very, very impressive. It's like, like almost everything in Instructables, right? This whole idea of not only am I going to go to great lengths to kind of make this thing still work or make it do what I want it to do, even though it wasn't necessarily designed to do that. And I will share with you how to do it.
Okay.
I'll show you the path that I took.
Sure. Okay. So we'll have a link to that video. It was a YouTube video. So Rich, what's a fourth tool that you like to share with us?
Yeah, the last one I'll point to is Matter, which is a fairly new service that is on the surface of it a bookmarking service.
Okay.
But one of the things it does extremely well is managing a queue and making it available from a text to speech standpoint. But
okay.
Yeah.
So if
meaning I have a reading list.
Yeah.
Now I've turned that reading list into effectively my own audiobook or my own podcast.
So, just to get a couple things, this is a phone app or web browser app or what?
It's I believe it's web only right now. I don't. Oh no, they do have an app. They do have an app. That's right. Yeah, there is.
So
I know.
I've
used the iOS side.
So it's web and phone, and presumably those integrate. And it's maybe like you say bookmarking. So like Delicious, like Evernote, like Readwise in that sense.
Right.
But different in what way?
It's the text to speech aspect, like very, very good, very well done. The interface is just very minimalist and smooth. Right. I think they have 5 or 6 different voices to pick from. And I mean, like that, there's nothing magic about text to speech in and of itself, but the layer that they're using and the models that they're doing are very good on like picking up the intonation and the tone that goes with it. The little bit of like uplift when it's a question, and picking up on points and end of paragraphs, and it's spooky how much it is very much like somebody reading to you.
And how would you use this? Give me an example of something you have used or had read to you in recent days.
Yeah. So a lot of times I mean, I read a lot just in the course of my job, what I do. And I'm a heavy Evernote user and will typically collect there and read from Evernote. But being able to kind of take that on the go, to be able to get through some of that when I'm driving or going for a walk or, doing chores or something. It's very well done. I've tried a couple things like that before, and little clunky,
Hmm.
maybe good for 10 or 15 minutes, but I've done, a 90-minute walk before going through, 4 or 5,000 word article,
Okay.
and being able to consume it and, do it at 120%, because you can kind of hear it a little bit faster than you
Sure.
can say it, so
And it would be smart enough to parse out, illustrations or avoid them, or sometimes formatting things could be problematic. And in this case,
yeah.
it's smart to figure that out.
They don't, yeah, it won't describe like diagrams
Hmm.
or images. It will read you the metadata
Right.
that's in there for web. They just launched I don't know if it's a parser or a reader, but specifically for PDFs, where you can just give it a PDF, upload a PDF or point it to a PDF online, and it will be able to parse it and read through it, that well. So,
Hmm.
but it's at least as good as, probably any screen reader I've
Hmm.
seen performance around of. But again, they got that little bit extra of almost like it has a personality
Yeah. Right.
behind it,
Sure.
right? It's enough to kind of fool your brain
Sure.
that you're
Sure.
like, oh, I'm just listening to somebody read,
Right. Right.
you know, not effectively just a machine or
Yeah.
algorithm, parsing through this whole
I
thing.
don't know if
So
you had a chance to interact with the AI called Pi, the personal.
no, I haven't.
Well, they also have it's a conversational interface,
Mhm.
and the AI, the bot, is not just is the intonation good, but they actually do have a personality that they
Put
program
into
into
it.
them, and
Yeah.
they make little jokes of the right. I mean, they're good. Their
Mhm.
delivery is impeccable, and there's nothing alien or uncanny valley about them at all. They're
Right.
totally convincing as a conversationalist, and so I can believe Matter would be pretty good by now. Um, so you're finding it like these are web pages, or do you say you can do a book in the sense that you could take a document, you could take a
Mhm.
document you had and you wanted it someone sent to you, you could have them read it to you.
I don't know if you can upload documents. I've mainly been using it as like a supplement to a web clipper,
Okay.
to articles. I mean, I get the impression they're very new,
Okay.
but they've gotten that interface, they've
Right.
gotten
Sure.
the user
Right.
experience down really, really well.
Right. And so you are clipping things. Do they clip as well, or you clip with Evernote and then have Matter read it?
Yeah, they have a Chrome
Extension.
extension,
Yeah.
and then it's also native iOS. Send to,
Okay.
the whole menu that
Right.
how it handles that.
Okay. Great.
I don't know on Android, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. They've
Right.
seemed to nail everything else pretty
And
cleanly.
so is probably a subscription?
They have a fairly generous free tier. I think of the 5 voices, maybe you get one or two
Okay.
at the free tier, and then the subscriptions. I have the subscription, which is I think it's 14 a month,
Okay.
and it opens everything up, and you can
Sure.
do different
Okay.
voices. Yeah,
Alrighty.
for me, it's been well worth it because it's I'm buying time, right? The ability to kind of spend
Yeah.
several, probably more hours a week reading that I wouldn't be able to because I'm otherwise engaged in something.
And by reading, you mean auditing.
Sure.
Just to,
I don't begrudge anybody who says they read a book and they listen to the audiobook. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same thing.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's I think auditing is oftentimes I prefer my fiction to be audited rather than
Yeah.
um well, this is really great, Rich. So we have a few minutes. Why don't you tell us about um a passion project you might have, or
Yeah.
a mission you're on, or whatever you would like to share with our audience.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just talk about I'll talk about the business I'm in right now. The the market that we serve, like who we help, are small financial institutions, banks, credit unions. There's usually this clip at about $10 billion in assets. Banks kind of think in balance sheets. And there seems to be not quite an appreciation for the role they play in our society, but in particularly our economy.
And how many are there, just to have a sense of the landscape in the U.S.? How many of that size are there?
Yeah, all in a little under 10,000.
Okay,
It's about half and half between banks and credit unions. Um,
10,050 states. So in your neighborhood, wherever you live, there's likely to be a handful of them.
a couple,
Yeah.
right? Correct,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right.
And in the thing about them is they, they essentially function as a source of risk capital for a lot of things that happen in local economies and local markets. Um, Way overrepresent in small business, particularly small business administration loans, like their ability to like source and service those, way bigger than larger banks, larger institutions. Also, commercial real estate. So you think about many of the places that you rely on, that you shop on local, um, strip malls, shopping centers, a lot of like projects like that typically are being serviced and being funded by a local financial institution, by a local bank, because it's that presence in the community, not just that there's a branch there, but that the leadership is there. They are active in the community. They know what's going on. They're tied into all of the things that kind of make that economy go, as opposed to this is one of our 10,000 branches that we're going to set up here as more or less a retail location. Um, so that size institution, really punches above its weight class, and everybody kind of really got scared about the risk into banks last year, with the Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, and worry about it, with good reason, and you start having flashbacks to, like, 2009, 2010. And what you saw was the the commitment and the resilience of the very, very big banks, the too big to fail banks, and the very, very small banks were just as well. They did just as well from financial performance standpoint, and their ability to hold on to deposits and remain solvent. Um, so that the small financial institution, it's often overlooked, but really valuable, really important, to the economy. And so, we kind of help them. We work with them from a data services standpoint. We do things around data science, data engineering, a lot of like IT architecture type work, but then also machine learning and AI. That's a little bit of my background. And help them in ways that they're really not going to be able to develop those skills or those capabilities in house, but can certainly have somebody come in and help them with incremental projects and bring on new capabilities that are helping them, continue to punch above their weight class in their service level.
And what,
And
okay,
so we,
what kind of things do they need help? I mean, specifically, what are you helping them to do that they haven't been able to do by themselves?
yeah, I mean, you look at some of the things that happen just in the normal course of business, like from a segmentation standpoint. You're an individual of certain income level, you're a business, you're a local government, you're a commercial real estate investor, right? And each one of those customers looks very different. And so you might think about, I have 7 or 8 different types of customers that do business with me, either depositor, things like checking accounts, transactional accounts, or we're doing merchant service accounts, like, being able to take credit card, or, we're taking your cash in at the end of the shift, those type of things. Or you're a lender. You're borrowing from me for a mortgage or for commercial real estate or to start or expand a small business. And those are discrete different things. And usually your problem is tied to a specific solution, a specific product. But when somebody begins to go across product lines and their needs become much more unique, you start breaking these segments apart. And you really need to have the tools to look at somebody as an individual, look at them from a complete view of what their needs are and what they're buying from you. And traditionally, I mean, a lot of these institutions are like 100 years old. Like that's not an uncommon thing to run across. Um, they're not on the cutting edge of technology. They're not on the cutting edge of being able to pull out, say, all of the features and functions of like, say, a personalization recommendation around that. Being able to see those customers as, segments of one, for example, and then treat them accordingly in like an efficient way.
Right. I'm saying like you maybe a bank, they have a customer who is, you know, uh, does real estate or something. And so they
Mhm.
tended to only see them as a customer doing real estate. And they may actually also at the same time, maybe they had something on the side that they were doing, or they were a family
Sure.
that needed this
Yeah.
because they were segmented as real estate. They weren't those other needs and wants weren't visible to them, and this is the way to make those
It,
visible. Is that
it might even be more complicated than that because for example, for a real estate investor, they typically will create a whole new LLC for each project they're invested in.
hmm
So one investor might have dozens of LLCs that they're doing both deposit and lending with you from. And it may be very hard to see them as this is the entire book of business that we're doing with them.
Okay,
Let me review that on a periodic
sure.
basis, see how
Okay,
I can help them,
okay,
and use that into like how I'm pricing the next deal that we're going to get into.
sure. Okay.
That turns out to be very difficult to
Oh,
do.
all right, okay. Well, that's and so for listeners, is there anything as someone who has been working with them, would you have any tips for the normal average person who might have to interact with a
Mhm.
small business, or even would you suggest that they consider that versus Wells Fargo or something? What is there anything from your own experience here that you would suggest as a bit of advice to us listeners out there regarding these local small credit unions and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, number one, there's more of them than you probably appreciate.
hmm
And there's more of them that, you probably drive past every day.
Sure.
And
And how are they
um,
better? How would they be better than going with a Chase or whatever the big banks are called these days?
I think it's that holistic view of all the different things that you're going to be involved in from your financial life and how they might help you, and particularly when you begin to like go through different phases and have different needs. I'm going to buy a vehicle. Maybe I'm going from being a renter to buying my first house.
hmm
I'm changing jobs. I might be changing locations, helping me go through those transitions. You're gonna find a lot more interest and really that personalized advice because that's the thing they're always going to lean into, and frankly their business model is built around
hmm
is you dealing with another human being one-on-one for your situation that you're in, as opposed to you're one of 10,000 people that have this specific tranche of type of product that you have. And if there's a problem or there's an issue, you're going to go into a very, very long call center to kind of get that resolved.
Right.
Um, One of the things that kind of came out of that last, the last crisis, in the Great Recession was the almost explosive growth of fintech companies, like technology companies that kind of are like a bank, kind of do this thing, particularly on peer-to-peer side, like just the monumental growth in Venmo and Cash App, two of the bigger ones. What was missing from that, and the government is very a little slow to the punch on realizing like, oh, people are treating these and expecting them to be like a bank, but they are not a bank and they are not regulated like a bank. And they don't have the same controls and oversight and compliance requirements that banks do. And so we're just kind of catching up to that right now where, they're being looked at as like, oh, you deal with people's money. there is a higher requirement you need to meet than,
Right.
say, a social media network
Right.
does, for
Right.
example.
So you're right. These days, young people probably have never been in a bank ever in their lives. I think my kids are
Mm-hmm.
like that. I don't think they've ever been in a bank. They do everything on their phones.
Mm-hmm.
Would you suggest to them that they go to a local credit union and have basically get a personal banker in that sense?
Go in and talk to them about what you're facing. What are you thinking about? What are you worried about? And they're going to have an answer for it. You're going to talk to an individual who has seen people like you in your situation
Hmm.
and being able to give very good advice about how to think about it, which way to go,
Hmm.
not just which product to buy or
Right, right, right,
come in and be a customer, but like how to think about
right,
how you use money to achieve your goals in
right, right.
life.
I think one of the what's it prejudices that people have often with that is that they're going to be sales, that they're going to be sold to. They walk in, it's like they're going to be like a mark, and they're innocent, and this person is going to upsell stuff to them. Is that what do you do about that fear?
I mean, there's always I'm here to get information, and like you would anything, any major purchase or decision, you obviously you shop around, you like look at alternatives and see. So go into the big bank, see how they treat you different, see what the different options are.
Hmm.
But always be you always got to read the fine print on a lot of these things. Particularly when it comes to things that have like, the percentage rate in a really big number, and being able to sit down and have somebody explain to you the difference between those two. And how a lot of the common terms and conditions may or may not be to your advantage.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a caveat emptor to this, but you're also going to find um, you're in general you're treated less as a number by a smaller institution because you matter more
Yeah.
to them. Their reliance on you to be a good reference
Mm.
for them, to be somebody who's going to say, yeah, I had a great experience with them. I had this problem, I didn't know what to do. They helped me, they point me in the right direction. I get everything I need from them. I'm never worried about, am I going to be able to get my paycheck on time and pay my bills on time? Like that gets taken care of and it's not an issue.
Right.
That they are fundamentally in the business of trust.
Right.
And the smaller institution realizes that and takes it much more
Yeah.
seriously
Right.
than their peer set does.
And one last thing for people, this is the question I have, which is, what's the difference between a credit union and a bank?
Yeah, pretty much it's how they're treated from a tax standpoint. That's an oversimplification,
But
and
does it make any difference to me as a consumer, as the customer?
not really. There are some technicalities in what a deposit is
Mm.
between the two, and they'll kind of talk about bank shares and how that's different than say interest rate that you get there. Um, at a very high level, on par, they're kind of the same. You'll typically see because uh, credit unions are nonprofits. Um, you will typically see lower rates on things like consumer loans, and that will get passed on to you. So there's some cost savings associated with that. The trade off is they will have a specific charter about the type of customer, or they won't talk about customer, let's say member, the type of member that they're allowed to have, whether that's a specific employer, like you'll see credit unions associated with specific
Yeah.
employer or specific job classifications.
Hmm.
Many of them are geographic
I
areas
see. Okay.
where they'll say, we're only allowed to bring in members that are in this
I
geography
see. Okay.
and go about that rate. Yeah.
All right.
But those lines are getting more and more blurred. You have some fairly large credit unions,
Hmm.
and you actually see credit unions buying regular chartered banks now as kind of part of their expansion. So,
Okay. Really no difference. Alrighty. Well, Rich, thank you so much for this. Um, I love the fact that we kind of veered into something that we don't normally get to in Cool Tools, which is, financial institutions, banking, interest rates. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your great tools.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
Alrighty. This year, our Cool Tools blog will be 20 years old, which means we've been posting something new every day for 20 years. It's only possible because of the very engaged and knowledgeable readers and listeners like yourself. You've kept this place going, and we are very grateful for you. With this idea of 20 years in mind, we decided to try an experiment this year, and I'm inviting our guests and listeners to join me on our Cool Tool Show and Tell, which is the program that you're listening to right now. So if you feel you'd make a good guest on this podcast and have 4 uncommon tools that you'd like to share with us, please sign up on our form on the website, and we'll see about inviting you. You must be comfortable talking on a video, and you need to have some tools that you can show. We record on, as you know, on Zoom. We do a YouTube version, a video version of it, as well as an audible version. Fill out the form if you're interested, and list your 4 cool tools, and we'll see if there's a good fit. The applications aren't guaranteed in any way, and we're looking at tools that are new to us and appropriate tools, and whether the times will work for you. So we're really interested in hearing from people all over the world, not just in the US, although the tools have to be available online, easily available online. And if you are a longtime listener, you kind of know what the definition of our tools are. They're very broad. They can be anything that's handy, from something in the kitchen to something you use to travel, to a workshop, to something professional that we may not know about. We're really interested in things that we don't know anything about. So this is an open invitation. We'll give it a try. If you think you make a good guest for this podcast, fill out the form. There'll be a link somewhere on our website. And we look forward to chatting with you. Thank you.